2017. The year for dreadful horror movies, or maybe you ironically saw a movie you knew was going to suck ever since the trailer first dropped. Or maybe your mom forced you to watch a movie aimed at easily amused women with her friends that you probably try your best to stay as far away from as humanly possible. So over the course of 2017, I saw 12 movies, with one of the movies being from 2016. So what I'm going to do is give my thoughts on the movies I saw in this video and rate them from worst to best in a separate video. So sit back, relax while I talk about some films. If you want to avoid any spoilers, I'll leave timestamps above so you can skip to the next movie I'll be talking about. So I wanted to say my thoughts and opinions on all the movies I saw in this video, but my video editor started corrupting around the 20-minute mark. Because of this, I'm making another video addressing the movies that I won't get to in this video, along with a rating from worst to best video being a separate upload. First movie up is La La Land, which I honestly adore. I always found musicals to be dreadful, boring, and uninteresting, but that's not the case for this movie. I used to think musicals were just simply one musical number which segues into maybe a minute of some character dialogue, to segue into another musical number, to segue into more dialogue, and so on, but this movie has definitely changed my perspective. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling do a damn good job getting us interested in their characters, which is also complemented by their chemistry with each other. Throughout the movie, you want to see them accomplish their dreams, and by the end when they realize they can no longer be together due to the struggle of one of them wanting to be a touring jazz musician and the other an actress, you're still left content with the overall result no matter how much you wanted them together. As much as I still find some of the musical numbers very cheesy, especially the one in the beginning, I still enjoyed every minute of it, not to mention just how great the music in the soundtrack is. If I had to pick at anything though, it would probably be the part of the movie when Sebastian just out of nowhere says that Mia might not be able to be an actress, which is probably the worst thing he could have said. It contributes to the main character acts like a dick out of nowhere cliche, which I've seen in a lot of recent movies. But still, the movie is enjoyable otherwise. I can easily say La La Land is my favorite movie to come out in 2016. So yeah, what a great movie to start off the year. The second movie is the Lego Batman movie, and oh boy, where do I begin? First off, when you think of Batman, do you see him as a vigilante of the night, with his ominous presence looking down from the rooftops? Or do you see him as a man-child who seemingly does whatever he can to be in the spotlight? That being said, when you think of the Joker, do you think of a lunatic fringe whose only purpose is to simply cause destruction for his own pleasure? Or do you think of a drama queen that would only go to extreme measures just to gain the attention of a certain Cape Crusader? You see where I'm coming from now? You can easily say it's just a kids movie, so you gotta make the characters more kid-friendly. So why would you choose DC's most darkest characters just to dumb them down and make them lose a lot of characters they were meant to have? I mean, you clearly wouldn't want them to mention Joker's scars on his face, or even Batman's backstory. Another thing, why are they Legos? This could have been any animation, but you choose to make everything Legos? Why? What's the purpose? The only time them being Legos was used in the storyline is at the end, when they literally make a human ladder to keep Gotham together, like a band-aid almost. If your only purpose to make everything Legos was to use one short part of the storyline, at the end mind you, and just to slap on the word Lego in the title for it to appeal to a younger demographic, that's stupid. I can guarantee that if this was just called the Batman movie, then kids wouldn't be that interested. Another thing I didn't like was the way they broke the fourth wall multiple times in the movie. The movie was almost condescending how it even snuck disses at Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad. If you think I'm trying to defend those two movies, you're wrong. I already witnessed the disaster that is those movies, but when you do it in your movie that dumbs down the characters to make them appeal more to kids, you really shouldn't feel the need to sneak disses at other movies. Well, if it worked in Deadpool, it must work here, huh? No. Just no. The third movie is Beauty and the Beast, and yeah, it was alright. I mean, I will admit that I'm not exactly hyped about Disney's decision to do live adaptations of other classic movies because, I mean, we all know how the stories go already, and they add nothing to the original movies they're adapted from. And in their adaptations, you can almost guarantee there will be a lot of CGI, which might not seem bad to others, but in my opinion, I just don't like the look of certain Disney characters in live action. In cartoon format, you can make the Beast look happy, with the proper facial features of course, as well as the objects. But in this movie, it just really doesn't do anything for me. No matter what shot the Beast is in, it's hard for me to picture a smile on his face without the thought of him planning on eating Belle. But the CGI isn't the main focus, the story is. And you know what? It's still very enjoyable nevertheless. Every character has a certain charm to them that I really like. Hell, I remember by the end of the movie, LeFou ended up being my favorite character, probably because Josh Gad's portrayal of the character was so entertaining for me to watch. If the movie I just watched had a cast that played their roles so well, that I even loved one half of the antagonists, that's a movie that was definitely worth watching. As much as I have my problems with the adaptation, it doesn't take away from the things I love about the movie, and by the end of the day, that's all that matters. The fourth movie up is Alien Covenant, which left me thoroughly disappointed. Ridley Scott's Alien franchise is another example of a movie becoming so popular that eventually people want to milk every dollar they can out of it. Granted, the sequel directed by James Cameron did marvelous. However, the other movies eventually became a clear sign that the franchise was no longer the series it once was. And this movie is no exception, even with Ridley Scott back as director. This movie follows all the cliches that have made horror flicks so repetitive and predictable. There is scenes where characters can't aim a gun to save their life, which usually costs them their life. Death due to idiotic decisions. There's a kind of sex scene that is ended by the beast killing off the two people in question. There is predictable jump scares that are made clear to happen, and of course the biggest cliche is that a lot of the characters are simply in the movie only to get killed off. Not once did I ever find a character I liked, which left me wanting the Xenomorph to just end up killing everyone. I feel like it's about time they retired this franchise already, but it seems money matters more to movie makers than creating great pieces of cinema. There was even a cliffhanger at the end, but I don't think there is any hope for another film since this one was so terrible. This just in, I looked back on how much the movie grossed and it made way more than double its original budget. So maybe if Ridley Scott is trying to bury his own franchise even more, we might be expecting another Alien sequel. Yeah, I'm utterly excited! The fifth movie up is Wonder Woman, and yeah, it was alright. Although it has its flaws like the awful CGI and often bland performance of Gal Gadot, and other stuff I'll get into, I still found some enjoyment out of it. The film opens up with what is actually going to be the ending, and then it fills you in on what happened. It shows the story of how Wonder Woman, or Diana, grew up on an isolated island for her own safety with some overly protective people around her. However, when a pilot named Steve Trevor washes up on her island by crossing through some weird force field thing, I don't know, I didn't write the story, he brings with him a group of Germans that are trying to kill him. Wonder Woman and the Amazons eventually fight them off, and she decides to help Steve fight the Germans in World War I, after he manipulates her into thinking she's actually fighting the greater power she thinks she is, who is the god of war Ares. There's a few lighthearted moments in the film, but it never ruins the tone of the movie, also adding some time to show the relationship between Diana and Steve develop. When they first got intimate, I honestly didn't like it, but eventually I didn't mind because I was able to get behind the chemistry between the two actors. At one of the fights near the end, Diana kills who she assumes is Ares, but she realizes that war is the cause of people, and that Steve tricked her. But out of nowhere, the real Ares reveals himself in the form of a terribly computer-generated transformer, and the true fight begins. In the middle of it all, there's an unfortunate but beautifully shot scene where Steve eventually sacrifices himself to destroy a helicopter full of bombs. You could see the pain in Diana's eyes when she witnesses the disaster, thus angering her so much to the point where she uses her rage to destroy Ares in an epic fashion. And yeah, then it jumps to what we saw in the beginning of the movie, but now filled in on the story. Although I enjoyed this film, I wish that they had done more with Ares' storyline since I feel he just comes out of nowhere really, as well as the other antagonists, as I feel they were a bit underwritten and not too interesting. This movie was still good enough for me to enjoy, and might I add just how epic the main theme is. I don't know what it is, but the tension that this simple piece built gave me shivers the first few times I heard it. This film is nowhere near one of the best superhero movies out there, but it was definitely an enjoyable one at that. And that's all I could really say. The sixth movie up is The Dark Tower, and wow, what a mess. The movie is based off the 1982 Stephen King novel of the same name. The plot for this movie is with this kid named Jake who has a power called the Shine, which is like the shining that Danny from The Shining has, but a little bit different. Danny's shining gave him the power to connect with another man who also had the shining, as well as giving him psychic abilities, while Jake's shine gives him the ability to communicate with others with the shine, and well, that's it from what I can remember. Jake dreams of Roland, also known as the Gunslinger, with his dad who is that guy from the Allstate commercials.
Are you in good hands?
Yeah, that guy. Well, he's killed off by Walter, also known as the Man in Black, and the Gunslinger intends to kill him to avenge his father. Eventually, Jake goes through a portal and meets the Gunslinger too. Yeah, still destroy the Men in Black. Walter eventually needs Jake because of the power he possesses to destroy the tower that keeps their universe together. I've sort of forgotten a bit of what happens in this movie because of just how forgettable it is, but one thing is for sure is that it has a lot of references to Stephen King's other works. The references kind of serve no purpose though. They even cut to a random scene of a Saint Bernard walking down the street. And guess what movie had a dog of the same breed as a killer dog? Oh yeah, Cujo by Stephen King. There was also a few problems I had with the movie. There's a random scene where Jake is getting bullied by some little shit, but ends with Jake punching him in the face, and then we never see that bully again. It really leads to nothing. With Jake's real dad dead, his mom is dating some douchebag, and while he's having these dreams about the gunslinger and the man in black, they just thought he was insane. At one point they even tried to send him away to some nut house, so when they were eventually killed off, I was more satisfied than broken due to how unlikable they were. There is a cliched scene where Jake is tricked by an illusion of his father, which in the end is obviously not his father. There is a scene where the gunslinger is talking to Jake on a rooftop and says something that gets Jake mad at him, but in the next scene they brush it off like nothing, and the gunslinger shows Jake how to shoot. Finally, the original book was said to include elements of dark fantasy, science fantasy, horror, and western, while the movie is labeled as a science fiction and horror. However, in the film's entirety it plays more like an action film more than anything else. Fuck's sake. Even in one of the scenes where the gunslinger fights some creature thing, it still feels like some monstrosity that you'd fight in, I don't know, Contra or something. The Dark Tower doesn't know what kind of movie it wants to be, and overall just isn't a good film. That's all I could say. Next movie. The 7th movie is Annabelle Creation, which I can only describe as a movie that I'm not sure if I like or hate. The Annabelle franchise is a spin-off from the popular horror film The Conjuring. The whole Annabelle story is originated from the urban legend about a haunted Raggedy Ann doll. This is the second installment of the Annabelle films, and to call this a genuine scary movie is a bit of an overstatement. I mean, there were a few suspenseful scenes set up well, but a lot of them ended in predictable jump scares, which have become a cliche in horror movies for the longest time now. The biggest problem I have is that the entire plot of this movie is due to what could have been an easily avoided situation. The entire movie is the result of a stupid kid not listening to Annabelle's dad, warning her to not open a door because, little to her knowledge, there's a deep evil concealed behind a closet in that said room. Even though he clearly told her not to go in the room, she still goes in and opens the closet, revealing a haunted doll that belonged to a girl named Annabelle, and essentially, shit hits the fan. If you're going to set up the plot for your sequel, at least don't make it center around the result of something so stupid. Speaking of stupid kids, the way Annabelle is killed off to establish her backstory is lazy and just terrible. While Annabelle's parents are repairing their car, they notice a car coming their way that they think could be of assistance. While struggling with a tire, a boat flies out into the middle of the road, which Annabelle goes for, and the car hits her, killing her, due to shitty writing. If she seriously didn't hear her mom announce a car was coming,
"There's a car coming, why don't I wave it down and see if we can get some help?"
or at the very least noticed the car when she was faced the direction it was coming from, then that's just bad writing. The film ends with what I assume is a tie-in to the first movie of the franchise, which I still plan on seeing in case I missed anything of interest in the storyline, which I really don't think is the case. I should at least say one thing I liked about the movie. There's a scene where the girl covers the Annabelle doll, and when she turns her back on it, the blanket springs up with possibly Annabelle's ghost under it, heading her way, which was actually a pretty creepy scene and well set up. Eventually, when the blanket falls off, the reveal is a bit weak, but still memorable nonetheless. It was at moments like these I had the feeling this movie had the potential to be a very great film, but for all the great setups it had, it all led up to a predictable and just terrible aftermath. The 8th movie is It, which was definitely the most anticipated movie of the year for me. This movie is a remake of the 1990s miniseries of the same name, which is also an adaptation of the 1986 Stephen King novel of the same name. The story is about a group of kids known as the Losers Club who encounter a being, usually taking the form of a clown, that turns into people's biggest fears to frighten them and eventually feast on them, its victims usually being kids. It awakens every 27 years to feast on as many kids as it can for about a year before it goes back into the sewers to awaken another 27 years to attack again. Yes, only a story like this can come from the mind of Stephen King, but I respect the man for all the work he puts into his books. I remember when I first saw the miniseries when I was a little youngling, I had a fear of clowns for the longest time, as did many others, but as time went on I realized just how silly the movie can be rather than bone-chilling. Now I just see the miniseries as an unintentionally funny mess, but I still enjoy it. I feel like what really made that movie memorable though was Tim Curry's portrayal as Pennywise, and of course scenes like this.
Well, you better let the poor guy out!
Now as far as this movie goes, it doesn't shy away from doing things that the miniseries was hesitant to do. If the miniseries showed Georgie get killed off screen, then in this version they show him to get his fucking arm bit off and dragged into the sewers to be finished off. That's fucking brutal, man. If Beth's dad in the miniseries gave off some uncomfortable vibes, then in this film he straight out tries to rape her. If Henry Bowers threatened Ben with his knife but he managed to escape without even a scratch in the miniseries, then Henry starts to carve his name into Ben's stomach in this movie. All these over-the-top scenes made the movie more faithful to the book it was adapted from, which really lets the true Stephen King story come to life, and I really enjoyed it, even though it does have its few flaws. The CGI is absolutely dreadful or unnecessary at times. Mike, Stan, and Ben aren't given much of a character, probably due to writers having to work a storyline around 7 kids all at once. But the characters are still likable nonetheless, and you can see how great the chemistry between all the kids are. The movie keeps the storyline consistent and interesting, even with the occasional moments that we don't see certain characters until they have a purpose for something. I'm looking at you, Stan. Now, as far as characters go, there is one character everyone couldn't wait to see. The new Pennywise, obviously. Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise was definitely memorable for me. Maybe because he used whatever he can to benefit his character. There are scenes where one of Pennywise's eyes goes a totally different direction, while the other one stays in place, which was originally going to be CGI, but Skarsgård could actually shift one of his eyes a different direction with the slightest of ease. And of course, Pennywise's now memorable smile is something Skarsgård originally used to do as a kid to scare his little brother, as a character he made up.
I came up with this character called Jörgen, and I would pull my t-shirt up like over my head.
Just isolate
the opening,
face.
yeah.
Just isolate the
and
face.
then I would do this face, and then I would chase my little brother.
You'd chase your brother.
Yeah, and scare him.
Now, as much as I love the creepy scenes that Skarsgård made his own, there are many scenes where he just comes off as goofy. Mainly the scenes where he flails his head side to side and starts to sound more like Goofy than an evil entity. Even with that in mind, I still enjoyed Skarsgård's performance and his chemistry with the kids, especially the scene where he first reveals himself with Eddie. You know, that sounded more better in my head than it did in words. This was actually the first time Jack Dylan Grazer saw Skarsgård in his full Pennywise costume and in character, and the scene where Eddie is cowering in fear is his legit reaction. The movie is not really that scary as much as it is suspenseful, but that's probably because I don't have coulrophobia anymore. Overall, I enjoyed the film, and I can't wait for the sequel to come out. By the way, Tim Curry is the better clown. The 9th movie is Mother, and I honestly don't know how to feel about this movie. This is a Darren Aronofsky film, who's directed many thought-provoking films that people will either love or be lost the entire time. However, I was sort of at a mix between understood and unpleased. Right from the start, the film opens up with what you'd assume would be an ending to some suspenseful movie. We see Jennifer Lawrence's character form from burnt ashes back to human, as she gets out of bed and makes her way downstairs to talk with her husband. I'm not going to say her name in this film because, well, she isn't really given one, as is any of the characters in this film. Not once did I ever recall hearing her name uttered in the movie, which led me and my friends to just naming her Allison because, I don't know, you should at least have the name of the main character for the movie you're watching. Her husband, who I'll just name Douchebag because, well, you'll understand throughout the movie, dreams of becoming a famous poet but at the moment is at writer's block. Eventually, a stranger asks if he could spend a night at their home, but Allison, being the paranoid person she is, doesn't want a stranger staying in her house. Well, Douchebag is totally okay with it because the man claims to love his poetry. A day goes by, and then a woman enters their house claiming to be related to the man. Douchebag convinces Allison to let them stay at their house because he needs someone to inflate his ego, I guess. Eventually, 2 kids come by, one kills the other, Allison tells the family to fuck off and demands Douchebag to stick his self-loving cock inside her, she becomes pregnant, Douchebag writes a beautiful poem that is illustrated via CGI, his poem becomes popular with the masses, causing many people to come to his house, they hide in the room where Allison has her baby, when they exit the room, the crowd kills and eats the baby, the house morphs into multiple scenes of disaster, then the house explodes killing everyone except Douchebag and Allison living by a thread after being burnt to shit. Give me a moment. This film is said to be an interesting look between the coming of Christ and man to Mother Earth, which, I mean, I can kind of see, but the delivery is still very much a mess. Every now and again, Allison would feel the walls of the house to reveal a burning heart that is implied to be the heart of Mother Earth, which starts beating rapidly whenever Allison is starting to feel uneasy. I also must add just how predictable the movie gets near the end. Over the course of the movie, Douchebag and Allison are trying to keep a stone safe, but eventually the visitors break it. When Douchebag reaches into a burnt up Allison's heart, he takes out of it what else but the stone they tried keeping safe throughout the movie. And remember how I said the beginning of this movie looks like something that would happen at the end of a suspenseful film? Well, when Douchebag puts the stone from Allison's heart on the stand that the old stone was, the house is restored to its original self, and Allison is revived from the ashes and wakes up seemingly to start the whole ordeal over again. So, either I'm the type of person who wouldn't understand the art of this film, or even people who like going to underground coffee shops to snap their fingers to poetry would say, hey, that movie kinda sucked. This movie, in my opinion, could have been something great, but the predictability, terribly displayed mixed message doesn't exactly make the movie special in any way, as far as I can see.